Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Labour says it faces losing more than a quarter of its funding thanks to government plans to change the way the party gets money from trade union members, along with other moves to cut state funding for the opposition. In a rare TV outing, the party's General Secretary Ian McNicol has told us just how damaging the changes could be. Here's Ellie Price with the details.
They've paid good money for tonight. An audience of around 800 people turning out on a Thursday night in North London to watch well-known comedians, artistic and political types talk about, well, why Jeremy Corbyn ought to be Prime Minister. Who are you here to see?
Jeremy Corbyn. Absolutely.
He wasn't here, and this wasn't a fundraiser, but similar nights to this have raised cash for the party.
Welcome, one and all, you bunch of loony lefties. How are you doing?
I started in my constituency in Brentford. We raised about £1,000. And then other constituencies asked me to do the same thing. And we've done 165 and raised £100,000.
And I will cut you, I swear to God.
And it's just as well, because the Labour Party says it could be about to lose around £8 million of funding if government plans to change the way it collects money from trade union members goes through. And they say it's no laughing matter.
It's an affront on British democracy. If you look at any previous agreement which changed the funding of a political party, it was done on a consensual cross-party basis, an agreement because of the effect that it had.
So is this an existential threat to the Labour Party?
It would be very difficult for the party. A cut of 25 to 30% of our annual funding would mean that we would not be able to operate in the current way that we do, holding the government to account as Her Majesty's opposition. It is just unfair and unjust.
The cash goes towards staffing, reportedly around half its costs, and of course campaigning. Things like party election broadcasts, battle buses, Edstones.
Britain needs a Labour government.
At the moment, trade union members have to actively opt out of paying towards the Labour Party. In the future, they would have to opt in writing, within 3 months, something Labour fear people just won't get round to doing. It also coincides with a 19% cut to so-called short money, cash given to all opposition parties to help with the costs of parliamentary business, a sort of concession for not having the civil service like the government does. But the man who used to be in charge of said civil service says the government's plans are at best partisan.
It goes to this wider question of what I would see as a worryingly authoritarian streak in government that finds it difficult to live with and accept challenge. And I think that's something that people of all parties, I'm actually a crossbencher, not in any party, but I think whichever party you're in, you should be concerned about this.
There's nothing authoritarian about having something clearly flagged in our manifesto, voted for in the majority government and delivered on, and there's nothing authoritarian about having transparency. That's to say, if you're a Labour Party supporter and you're a member of a trade union, you actively choose to do it rather than having it forced upon you without your knowledge. Frankly, I think the Labour Party needs to get out and convince union members that it's a good use of their money to give that money to the Labour Party, just as the Conservatives and Liberal Democrats have to convince people to give them money directly. We don't rely on people accidentally giving us money.
Back in Kentish Town, the organisers here say a night like this is as much about raising awareness and morale as it is cash. Jeremy Corbyn's leadership campaign relied on grassroots support. Now, as the party's funding streams start to dry up, it could well need to rely on people like this, people willing to come to a night about Jeremy Corbyn that he himself isn't even at.
Jeremy Corbyn for Prime Minister.
In fact, Mr Corbyn may prefer the thought of appealing to the wallets of people like this rather than the traditional big donors, a number of whom have already publicly abandoned the party anyway. But fundraising made up just 3% of the party's income last year. The spotlight will now fall on how Labour pays its way in the future.
Ellie Price reporting. We now say goodbye to viewers in Scotland who leave us for Sunday Politics Scotland. Now, this week in the House of Lords, Labour peers will try to fight off these government plans to change the way union members give money to the party. The shadow leader in the Lords, Angela Smith, joins me now. And I should add that we did ask to speak to a government minister, but none was available for a change, or not. Let me come to you on this. If you join a trade union, why should part of the membership fee be given to the Labour Party without your explicit approval?
Well, it's a choice you can make, and I think one of the things that was said during the House of Lords debate was a Conservative peer, Michael Forsyth, said, what's the problem? Where's the evidence that people are being forced to opt in and not being allowed to opt out? But I think one of the key things here as well is the government is saying you've got to opt in rather than opt out. But whereas they gave businesses 2 years to bring in a plastic bag levy, they're giving trade unions 3 months to change their entire system for doing this.
So if they gave you 2 years, would you change your mind?
No, in principle, I think they should.
So it's not really a matter of timing,
well,
it's a principle.
It's a principle matter, and it's a matter of admin. If you say you have to do it every 5 years in writing, and within 3 months, the government are trying to make it as difficult as possible. When the Committee on Standards and Public Life looked at this, they did so in the context of a number of changes that could be made, and they gave us like a 3-year lead-in time. But the government aren't looking at any of those other changes on party funds that would affect them, only those affecting the Labour Party.
But on the principle, there are many, many union members do not vote Labour. So why should they have to opt out? Surely it's those who want to join Labour that should have to opt in. It's not a big ask.
But there doesn't seem to be any problem with people being asked to opt out. But if they want to do the opt-in instead of opt-out, then look at this in the context of funding for all political parties. What's key about this is the government have to pick just one recommendation from the Committee of Standards in Public Life. So they've picked the one that only will affect the Labour Party and doing nothing to look at Conservative Party funding. It's blatantly partisan and it's blatantly unfair.
It may be, but is it wrong within its own right? Because isn't it the case that Labour depends on inertia? There are many people who pay the political levy, but they don't really want to, but they can't be bothered, or they don't know about opting out. I mean, isn't it time that you stop tricking non-Labour unionists into bankrolling your party?
Nobody's tricking anybody. That's grossly misrepresenting the
then
position.
Go for an opt-in.
Well, I have said if they look at opt-in in the context of all the Committee of Standards in Public Life issues, then yes, you can do it. But they know, they say themselves, you say tricking, the Conservatives are saying, let's have this huge administrative burden on trade unions and do it within 3 months. It's blatantly unfair. You know, Andrew, as well as I do, it will ensure that in that short space of time that's been allowed, they won't be able to reach everybody if they have to do it in writing.
But you've said to me, even if you 2 years, you'd still be against it. So
no, what I've said is, if you
the timing doesn't seem to be really an issue.
No, that's not exactly what I have said. If you want to do it over a long period of time, in the context of all the other measures that have been addressed on party funding, what is unfair is looking at just one measure that affects one political party.
Right. Now, I understand you think the government's picking on your particular means of
not just I think it. I think many people think it, including
I think you're here to
Conservatives.
represent these many people.
Yes.
But if you look at what's happening in the United States, Democratic contender Bernie Sanders, on the left of the party, no union backing, no big donors, no big business backing him at all. He managed to get, and he's not even running nationwide yet, over 3 million individual donations. He rose 20 million in January alone. Now, we're told that Jeremy Corbyn has struck a real chord with people who never got involved before. Why don't you raise more money from ordinary sympathisers?
Well, we increasingly are, and don't think for a moment that trade unionists who opt in to their levy aren't ordinary sympathisers of the Labour Party. Many, many are, and I think over time, in a longer period, you wouldn't see the drop-off that the Conservative Party is hoping for.
But why don't you get more individual donations? I mean, $20 million in 1 month in America.
It's absolutely amazing, and I would like to see a change in how we fund political parties, and that's what the Committee on Standards in Public Life looked at. It looked at reducing the cap on donations, of of reducing the spending limits, and it looked at trade union funding. But you can't just take one part. If you look at that as a whole, that is a fair approach.
How much do you raise from individual members?
Oh,
excluding the big donors?
Offhand, it's about 2/3 of the funding comes from individual members
and donors. No, but excluding the big donors.
I couldn't give you percentages, Andrew. Ian McNichol, our General Secretary, could give you exactly the figures. But I think it's right that we have
isn't that the way
base
for Labour to reduce its dependence on the unions? I mean, you get, I think, about 8 million a year from the unions at the moment. And many people in your party used to think that that kind of funding was a disadvantage for the Labour Party because you're more than the unions. Wouldn't that be the way of getting small individual donations would bring a lot of money and show you're not in anybody's pocket?
If you take them over the course of Parliament, it will be about £8 million a year. But that's about a third of the money we get in. We get money from all kinds of areas, and we get money from extra donations from our members as well. What I'm looking at specifically here is a Conservative Party that so dislikes the unions, it appears, it wants to cut their funding, not just to us, but for their own campaigning they do, and reduce what they give to the Labour Party. If they want to do that, look at party funding as a whole. But I think it is ill-conceived of a government to look at just trying to nobble the opposition and not look at their own funding.
And I take your point that they're not stopping big donors from giving money. But haven't you become, big donors on the Conservative side, I mean, but haven't you become more dependent on the unions than you? I mean, at one stage we thought you were becoming less dependent, but you're more than ever. And your leader seems to be making that dependence even greater. According to a recent report, Jeremy Corbyn, quote, treats big Labour donors with disdain and has abandoned fundraising.
Andrew,
is that true?
I'm no idea. It doesn't seem to be true at all. We looked at all our members and supporters that made donations, but I'm not going to apologise for the Labour Party's relationship with trade unions. We grew out of the trade unions. We worked together on issues. It's not. It's a good relationship between us two.
What I'm asking is, are you not becoming over-dependent on them, and you're therefore vulnerable to this kind of action from a Conservative government?
Our donations to individual members of the Labour Party continues to increase, and that's the right thing to do. But what my big complaint is, and I can't give you the figures. I don't do the sums for the Labour Party.
So how do you know they're increasing?
Because I've seen the figures, and I just can't remember them.
If you've seen the figures, why can't you tell me?
Because I haven't got a photographic memory, especially on a Sunday morning.
I know the problem.
You know the problem. But
let me ask you this then, finally, because we're running out of time. Are you going to block it in the laws, do you think? Because it was in the Tory. You may not like it, but it was in the Tory manifesto.
No, what we've asked the House of Lords to do, and this came from cross-party, they accepted this, was let's investigate this properly. Don't take the government's word for it or my word for it that it's unfair. Let's have an independent committee from cross-party to investigate what the government's trying to do. That committee is going to report, and I put a lot of store by that committee to look at the facts of this. That's going to report on the 29th of February.
OK, we'll wait to see that. Thank you very much.